Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? Been off for a while, but it's good to be back and in the heat and getting some episodes done.
Well, that's right. It's nice and hot today, so I'm outside enjoying it, and it looks like we've got some good topics to cover today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm cheating. I'm enjoying the heat on the inside, so there you go. So just before we jump into our main topic for today, just wanted to apologise for the last two episodes. We had a bit of a technical issue with the video, and this is now going to feature in the episode because I've got this nice, wonderful new MacBook, and it works really well. I'm not complaining too much, but there is a narrative out there that these new machines are generating issues that one would not come to expect from Apple. So in this case, I mean, I guess this issue where it didn't record the video could have just happened on any machine, and it's not as if they're perfect, so these things can happen. But I found it curious that that it did, and one other area that I wanted to go into in terms of this machine, in terms of trying to troubleshoot things, is the keyboard, because there's been a lot spoken about these butterfly mechanism keyboards on the current refresh, and that people don't like them, they don't like typing on them, they're too loud. But there was a thread that I started seeing, YouTube videos, comments, etc., that said that it was prone to you typing a lot more errors, and I actually started to encounter this practically. So I'm fairly aware of how well I type, and I was getting to the point where it was effectively creating an error every 5 or 6 words. And forcing me to slow down my typing to make sure of what was going on. Now, I did a lot more research, so hopefully this will help some of you who aren't aware of this. Hopefully a lot of you have already worked this out. And I can't believe that I had to do this, because this to me feels like a Windows PC 90s type fix, where you have to go in and you have to figure out how to switch something off in some deep setting somewhere. Now, as it turns out, if you go into System Preferences, hit the Keyboard Preferences pane, and then switch off everything related to autocorrect, that pretty much solves 99% of the issue. So I did that after reading about it on a couple of forums, and now I'm back to typing pretty much the way I was before, and actually I don't have an issue with the keyboard now. So... But the fact is that I thought macOS was meant to take care of this sort of stuff without you thinking about it. I've been using Macs for about 11 years now, and I've never had to do that. So I don't know what you think about that, Steve. But it just seems, and literally it wasn't just one setting like autocorrect. There were 5 or 6 in the keyboard settings that had to be switched off in order for this to occur. And I actually didn't find it acceptable, really. Because the fact that, I know my way around a computer, and the fact that I had to go and research the solution, how's that going to fly with people that, aren't as tech savvy, for instance?
Well, look, this has been creeping into our dialogue around Apple now for probably the last couple of years. Even the fact now that, there's a fair chance that you'll need a YouTube video to work out how to use Final Cut 10, or, you'll need to use a YouTube video to find out what to turn on or off to fix a problem. Historically, that's not Apple, right? And that goes right back 30 years of Apple.
It just works, right?
It just, back to the Macintosh, it just works, and it doesn't. And I think the only time that I can think of would have been in the mid-90s, just before Steve Jobs came back, and we started to see these sorts of things. We saw a proliferation of products that nobody actually quite knew what the difference between any of the models of Macs were. We're kind of seeing that now, and there are also starting to be these little fiddly things creeping into the OS. And, sure, it's a lot more complicated today, but I just think, Apple could stick with their high price point, they could stick with their premium brand, but it'll all come undone if it just doesn't work. And that's it's meant out of the box, it's just meant to work.
Yep, exactly. All right, enough on that. We'll transition to the main topic, which I want to have a bit of a play with the impact of social media and all that sort of stuff in this particular topic. But I don't know if this was too out of the ordinary in the sense that I can imagine there are people, celebrities and whatnot, or anyone that's in a public position might want to try to stage a hoax to benefit their career. But in case you hadn't heard of this one, Empire actor Jussie Smollett paid a couple of guys to beat him up under the auspices of being a hate crime. It initially started as people extending a lot of sympathy to him, like, poor guy, we got to find out who did it. And then it was discovered by the Chicago Police Department that all wasn't what it seemed, and it turned out that he basically staged this he's basically saying he wanted more money or something for his TV contract, more publicity. I should also point out it's all alleged, so we can't say definitively, of course, as all the comedians have said, allegedly. But I not so much want to dive too much into the case itself, but other than the fact that, obviously someone doing this is just, it's reprehensible, really. And it kind of, I guess it set off a whole discussion around what happens to real victims who have been really attacked. Does it cast doubt on their stories? Does it make it harder for them to come forward about this sort of stuff? And what do we do in the instances of this where, it's a fake and the certain other types in the media will probably jump onto that, saying that all the other ones that get reported are like this. It's like I almost find the reaction to it more interesting than what actually happened here.
Yeah, well, I probably am more interested in the motivation, and I take away the whole race thing. Now, Ben, you and I have been involved in making films for a long time now, and I remember very early on in our careers, I got a call. I think we'd been holding some auditions, and I got a call from a guy who was an actor or a writer-actor, and he wasn't actually interested in being in our films. He was just interested in seeing what it was like to be abducted, and he was going to pay me some money to come around with another guy, take him to an ATM, force him to withdraw money, and then tie him up under a house in some undisclosed location. And, of course, I said no. I think the interesting thing was about 3 months later, he was on the news and he got found out that he hoaxed this thing. So this idea of this concept of people acting out, and we all know that actors have very fertile imaginations, and most good actors would imagine this sort of stuff because it adds to their ability to act and play a role. So it's not really surprising what we're seeing here. I think we'll talk a bit about the race side of it in a minute and the reactions to it. But, I mean, the only dumb thing is he actually acted it out or thought he could get away with it.
Well, it seemed like he didn't think it through very carefully. Like, for instance, you'd probably want to get more casting to type when it came to the people who beat him up, or the fact that he paid these two guys by cheque instead of cash, for instance.
He's not a director or a producer, quite obviously.
Yeah, that's right. And on top of that, the two guys turned on him pretty much straight away under police questioning. So, and now it would appear that he's been.
Well, they're very serious allegations.
Yeah, and plus Fox has let him go from Empire for the last 2 episodes of the season, pending further review, etc., etc.
That's a hefty price to pay.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you could go back to work, be taken seriously. No one would want him there, I would have thought. But
we've worked with people like this, though, Ben, haven't we?
It's true. This is the seedy side of the business, folks, and it's not quite what you'd expect. Just moving on to just the reaction. This is where I find it's most interesting. So, we've talked about the partisan side of things and the extremes where things have gone too left, too right, and it seems like this story has exacerbated, or not exacerbated, but has highlighted how this works. So when it was revealed that he'd been attacked, there was obviously the left outcry that, the victim, etc., etc., we got to do something. There was the right that probably said, yeah, right, it's a hoax. Then when it became a hoax, the right went off their nana about it. The left sort of went a bit more silent about it. And instead of maybe, I think one of the more moderate ways to look at it is that as a journalist, say, journalistic point of view, perhaps it should have been, take the allegation seriously, but investigate it and figure out what's actually going on, as opposed to writing a headline, victim, we got to do something about it in the first instance. And striking that tone would potentially allow us to continue to listen to real victims, while still finding a balance between that and, say, something like this, which is at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, that needed to be investigated and worked out so we could get to the truth of it.
Well, this is a really good point, and we've once again spoken about this a lot. Pardon me. I actually read the original report of the incident, and it was just an account of what was claimed to have happened, and there was a subtext that there was some sort of gay or race hate involved. But what happens in the modern age is it just takes one article like that, and then all your opinion people pile in on both sides, creating a polarised debate, and then when it gets turned out to show a hoax, then that just turns it all on its head. And it actually goes to show you the value of opinion, even when it's through respected journalistic channels, is just a waste of time. In fact, I think if the media really thought about it, the traditional media really thought about it, they'd separate opinion from fact, and they'd run news stories and they'd run opinion pieces, but actually mark them up as such. And because all opinion does is attract people that agree in the little echo chamber, but the actual story itself, and in this case, all the I guess conjecture and diatribe that's been going on around this had nothing to do with the facts. The facts are somebody made up a story, allegedly, we think now, made up a story, and things weren't what they seemed. And that's the story. And, should we despise him? Well, no. Was it dumb? Yes. Was it not helpful? It was definitely not helpful. But it is what it is. It's not really part of the debate about race or sexuality and hate crime.
What about
people raging on about it?
What about this idea that as a culture we're focused on a specific story as opposed to an issue? So, for instance, we can talk about hate crimes, racial issues, whatever, and talk about this broad context of an issue that affects us all, but that doesn't capture anyone's interest. Yeah. What happens is you take a story like this and it's got a sharp focus to it, and then all of a sudden people start to fire up, and it seems like that's the only way. But the thing is, it's skewed. So there's no way to really engage with maybe the underlying issues that are there.
Well, that's absolutely right. And I think the other thing that we're starting to see in this world where, people must be heard, and I want to be careful about how I say that because I don't disagree with what I'm about to say, but, that there is an element of if you think it's real, it is real. And this is the sort of thing that happens when you think something's real, and therefore you take a cause and you take a side. But when it turns out not to be real, what does that do to the value of your beliefs? It actually diminishes them. And I think that's really, in this case, that's been the big damage that Smollett has done.
And maybe just as a general thing to finish up on is just, maybe take a step back and just look at things in their entirety and in a bit more depth before jumping to any particular conclusions would be the call of the day across pretty much any sort of issue really in today's world.
Very true.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there, Steve. So don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube, Vimeo channels, RSS feeds, etc. And you can listen to our podcast on your devices, etc., wherever you are in the world. And we'd greatly appreciate taking the time out that you do, listening to us and visiting our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.